Let's face it, none of us really love to spend money, do we? Or maybe that's just me. Anyhow, I've got 5 great basic maintenance hacks for you to do so that you don't have to spend out quite as often. Let's save some money. For most cyclists, we were taught to use both brake levers at the same time when growing up. But why? Well, firstly, you're not going to go over the handlebars, and secondly, you're not going to end up pulling a skid. Combining both of those things are obviously pretty important for the confidence whilst growing up on a bicycle. However, for many experienced cyclists out there, we tend to actually just use the front brake for about 90% of the time. But why exactly? Well, it's actually the most efficient way of slowing down your bike, believe it or not, but it does take a bit of getting used to. Have a look at your brake pads, go on. Filthy, aren't they? Look even closer. Now, if you're handy with that front braking technique, there's a good chance that your front brake pads are going to be showing quite a bit more wear than the rear ones. If they are, it's simple. Pop them out and swap them around. Put the front pads into the rear and the rear into the front. But before you actually go about doing that and riding off again into the sunset, just inspect them a little bit closer once more, and this time look for any tiny fragments or shards of metal that are embedded into those brake blocks. Because believe it or not, you can actually pick those up from your rims. If you have got that, just simply get yourself a pick or a knife, anything like that, and actually remove them from the compound of those brake pads. Because if they stay embedded in there and you begin to carry on braking, they are in fact going to enhance the wear of your rims. So we're going to save money there 2 ways, aren't we? You're going to get longer lasting rims, and importantly, you're not going to have to buy new brake pads quite as often. A filthy chain is going to wear out so much quicker than a nice clean one. But why? Well, all of that grime that's accumulated on the chain is actually acting like a cutting paste within the links and the rollers of it, which is not good news, is it? So today, let's look at how to save you some money as well as getting you a nice clean chain. How exactly then are we going to do this? Well, ideally, you're going to be using a quick link connector on your chain because it's going to make you more likely to do it, because it is quite a thorough job, but it can be nice and quick if you've got one of those connectors. Also, a couple of jam jars, a funnel, your favourite degreaser, and some coffee filter paper. But don't worry, we're not going to be making coffee today or anything like that. Right, grab that chain then, that filthy, mucky chain of yours, and put it into one of the jam jars. And then either spray in your favourite degreaser or decant from a big bottle, and then enough to actually submerge that chain. Put the lid on, give it a good old shake, enough so you think it's pretty much spick and span. So nice and clean, there's nothing on there hanging around. Once you're happy with that, remove the chain, just give it a rinse under a tap and allow it to dry somewhere. Now we're going to start saving some money though. With that other jam jar, put the funnel in the top and then put that coffee filter paper inside of the funnel. Get that mucky old degreaser and pour it into that coffee filter paper. Look at all that stuff going through into the jam jar. You can reuse that. So whilst it's all gone through, get the filter paper and dispose of it carefully, and then put the lid on that jar. You can then use that time and time again, just repeating that process. So not only now have you got a clean chain, you've also got degreaser that can be reused time and time again. Now, depending on how filthy your chain is in the first instance or the second instance or the third instance, depends on how many uses you get out of it. But I've been able to get over 20 different clean chains from one jar. Pretty good, isn't it? Still got my wallet in my pocket. If you've got yourself a frayed cable on either the rear brake or the rear derailleur, when you go to replace it, because you are going to replace it, I take it, don't just bin it. Instead, cut it about 1 centimetre before the fraying starts, and you can then use that again. What's that? You can't use it on the rear. No, you can't, but you can keep it as a spare for the front. So if you end up fraying either your front brake or front derailleur cable, you can use this one straight away. Or in the worst case scenario, if you have a snapped cable, this one is an ideal replacement, saving you a little bit of extra money there. If you've got yourself an externally cabled mechanical group set, have I got a trick for your rear derailleur? Because that rear derailleur cable is under a lot of abuse, not just from you changing gear, but also from all the grime that comes up off the road and gets transferred from the inner cable into the outer cable. And that leads to bad gear shifting. Now this is only really a temporary solution, but it means you aren't going to have to spend out quite as often on new cables. But how are we going to do it then? Well, first of all, change gear at the rear of the bike into the easiest sprocket, so that's the one with the biggest number of teeth. And then don't pedal anymore. Instead, press or change gear as if you were going to go into a harder gear. Put it all the way. You might need to add a little bit of tension to the cable underneath the chainstay just to actually help the gear lever mechanism move. Once you've done that, you should be able to pull the outer cable from the boss on the underside of that chainstay enough for actually to pop out, and then you can move backwards and forwards that outer cable along the inner cable. Give it a quick wipe down with a bit of cloth or an old t-shirt, something like that, and then apply a thin layer of grease to it before sliding it back into place, back into that boss, and then in quite a smooth movement, just give the pedals a quick turn to allow the gears to work properly. So now you're going to have a slightly longer lasting rear derailleur cable, and also, more importantly, I think, it's going to be smoother. Nice. Fixing an inner tube. It sounds obvious, doesn't it? Yet so many of us out there, we don't do that. Instead, we replace a punctured tube with a brand new one. Now that's not good for your wallet, and importantly too, it's really not good for the environment, let's face it. So let's say an inner tube costs €5, $5, £5. You can actually buy a sheet of 48 puncture patches for $2, £2 or €2. So think about that. You could repair 48 inner tubes for that price, saving you the equivalent of $238, euros or pounds compared to what you would spend on new tubes. Now, admittedly, riding along with an inner tube covered in patches, it's not going to give you the best quality ride, but for a spare for your saddlebag, think about that. It's a big saving to be had, isn't it? So there we are, some money saving hacks so that you don't have to spend out quite as often. Now, if you've got a money saving hack, leave it for me down there in the comments section. And who knows, maybe you'll make it into part 2 of John's money saving maintenance hacks. Also, remember to like and share this video with your friends. Give it a big thumbs up down there in the comments section. Also, if you've got a really extravagant spending club mate, maybe share it with them so they don't spend out quite as often. And now don't forget to check out the GCN shop at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, where we have a whole heap of goodies. And now for another great video, how about clicking just down here for the latest GCN Tech Show.